Here's a question nobody asks. You've probably wondered what ancient humans ate, how they fought, how they survived brutal winters without so much as a jacket. But here's the one thing historians almost never talk about. What happened when they got old? Like, did cavemen retire? Did a 50-year-old Neanderthal just wake up one morning, set down his spear, and say, you know what? I'm done. The answer, and I promise this is going to blow your mind, is way more complicated, and honestly, way more human than you'd ever expect. Let's start by destroying a myth you've probably believed your whole life. Most people assume prehistoric humans barely lived past 30. Short, brutal lives. Die young, no exceptions. You've heard it, maybe you've said it. It's almost entirely wrong. Here's what actually happened. Yes, average life expectancy in prehistoric times was low, somewhere around 30 to 35 years, but that number is brutally skewed by something we often forget: infant mortality. If a child died at age 2 and another person lived to 60, the average is 31, but someone still lived to 60. Forensic anthropologists, the scientists who study ancient bones, have found skeletons showing signs of advanced age over and over again. Arthritis, worn down joints, teeth ground to almost nothing. These aren't 25-year-olds. These are people who survived decades. In fact, a landmark study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences found that in hunter-gatherer societies, once you survived childhood, your odds of reaching 68 to 78 years old were surprisingly good. So ancient humans did get old. They did reach something like what we'd call retirement age. The real question is, what did that look like? Okay, so there was no 401k, no Social Security, no beach condo in Sarasota. When an ancient human got too old or too injured to hunt, to gather, to keep up with the group, what happened next? For a long time, the popular assumption was dark. You got left behind. The tribe moved on. Survival of the fittest. No room for the weak. And in some cases, that was true. There's archaeological evidence of nomadic groups where elderly individuals were abandoned during migrations. It sounds brutal. And it was. But here's the twist. That was actually the exception, not the rule. Across dozens of archaeological sites, from Europe to Africa to Asia, researchers keep finding the same unexpected thing: evidence of communities caring for their elderly and injured members. For years, sometimes decades. One of the most famous examples is a Neanderthal man found in Shanidar Cave in modern-day Iraq. Nicknamed Shanidar I, this individual was around 40 to 50 years old, ancient by Neanderthal standards. He had a withered arm, likely from an early injury or birth defect. He was partially blind. He had serious leg injuries. His bones showed healed fractures that would have taken months to recover from. And yet, he survived. For years. Maybe decades. He couldn't have done that alone. Someone fed him. Someone protected him. Someone kept him alive long after he could no longer fully contribute to the group. That's not survival of the fittest. That's community. So, if they weren't hunting anymore, what were they doing? This is where it gets really interesting, because ancient elders weren't useless. Far from it. They may have been the most valuable members of the group. They were the memory banks. Think about what it meant to live in a world with no writing, no books, no internet, no way to record information except inside a human skull. Every elder who survived was a living library, carrying decades of critical knowledge that younger members of the group desperately needed. An elder who had lived through 5 droughts knew which roots were still edible when the rains didn't come. An elder who remembered the path to a river 200 miles away could save the entire tribe. An elder who knew which plants caused hallucinations versus which ones caused death. That knowledge was, literally, the difference between life and extinction. Researchers call this the grandmother hypothesis, originally developed to explain why human females live so long past reproductive age. Unlike almost every other mammal, the theory suggests that grandmothers, specifically, played a massive survival role. While younger mothers were busy with infants, grandmothers gathered food, taught children, and passed on knowledge. Studies of modern hunter-gatherer groups, like the Hadza in Tanzania or the Kungsan of the Kalahari, support this completely. Older women, post-menopause, are often the most productive food gatherers in the entire group. Not less useful, more useful. They were the storytellers. Every culture in human history has oral tradition. Before writing, story was technology. It was how you encoded lessons about where predators lived, which rivers flooded in spring, how your ancestors survived the last great famine. Elders were the storytellers, the keepers of myth, ritual, and collective memory. Around the fire at night, and archaeological evidence suggests humans were sitting around fires for at least 400,000 years, the old ones talked. And everyone listened. They were the mediators. Conflict resolution is one of the most underrated survival skills a group can have. Tribes that fought internally were weaker against external threats. Someone had to settle disputes, maintain social order, decide who got what and why. That job fell to elders, not because of tradition, because experience. A 60-year-old who had seen feuds tear groups apart, who had watched what happened when alliances broke down, that person had something no young warrior had: pattern recognition. Now, because history is never simple, let's talk about the cases that don't fit the warm community care narrative. Not every ancient culture treated its elderly with reverence. In some Arctic cultures, when resources became critically scarce, elderly individuals would voluntarily, or not so voluntarily, remove themselves from the group. Some Inuit accounts describe elders choosing to walk out into the ice. It sounds shocking to modern ears. But in a world where every calorie counted and starvation was constant, it was sometimes framed as the ultimate sacrifice for the survival of children and grandchildren. There are also archaeological findings that suggest, in some populations, the elderly were sometimes the first to be eaten during extreme famine events. Evidence of cannibalism has been found at multiple prehistoric sites. It's uncomfortable, but it's part of the full picture. And yet, even these dark examples reveal something deeply human: intentionality. These weren't random acts of cruelty, they were decisions made within a moral and social framework, however alien it seems to us today. Let's get specific. What did a retired ancient human actually do with their days? Based on archaeological and anthropological evidence, here's what we know: tool making. Crafting spears, knives, and hunting tools requires more skill and patience than raw physical strength. Older members of groups were often the master craftspeople, teaching younger generations techniques that took decades to perfect. Fine flint knapping, chipping stone into a sharp blade, is a skill that requires thousands of hours to master. Elders were the workshops: plant knowledge, identifying hundreds of edible, medicinal, and poisonous plants, and knowing exactly when and where to find them across different seasons, is a lifetime's worth of accumulated knowledge. Ancient elders were, in effect, the doctors and pharmacists of their communities. Childcare. This one is massive and often overlooked. Grandparents caring for grandchildren freed up the parents, the prime hunters and gatherers, to maximize their productivity. This isn't sentiment, it's logistics, and it may be one of the core reasons humans developed such unusually long post-reproductive lifespans compared to other primates. Ritual and ceremony. As communities grew more complex, so did their spiritual and social rituals. Elders presided over births, deaths, coming-of-age ceremonies, and seasonal rituals. This wasn't just tradition, it was social glue. It maintained group identity and cohesion. Here's the part that I think matters most. We often look at ancient humans through the lens of brutality, survival of the fittest, red in tooth and claw, a world where weakness meant death. But the archaeological record keeps showing us something different. The fact that communities fed, protected, and valued their elderly members, even when those members could no longer hunt, fight, or reproduce, tells us something profound about what it means to be human. Compassion isn't a modern invention, it isn't a luxury of civilization, it appears to be ancient, wired into us, built into the social structures of groups that survived precisely because they took care of each other. The Shanidar 1 Neanderthal, blind, one-armed, crippled, lived for years inside a community that chose to carry him. That choice had a cost, and they made it anyway. Maybe that's not so different from us. Maybe the question isn't what ancient humans did after retirement. Maybe the real question is, what does it tell us about ourselves that they did it at all? If this video made you see ancient humans differently, hit that like button. It actually helps more people find this kind of content.